Okay, we just have to do this. Pax Romana. I've wanted to play this for a long time. As soon as I kind of heard about it and read a few things about it, I said to myself, I want this. I ended up paying, I don't know, probably about what it would go for new, rather than wait on the pre-order or whatever. I hate doing that, but maybe a little less. But I really wanted it. Anyway, then I start seeing it at auctions, and in the last 6 months or so, prices have dipped a bit in general. So I kind of say shit. But all right. But what about the comment about, well, let's just go ahead and start this? The reason is, like with Carrier, like with some others, I mean, I've pushed my ways through the rules a couple of times. I don't feel comfortable enough to explain them until I've played it. But by going through them with you, you'll get the rules explanation, though not maybe as good as you'd like, and I will get yet another little refresher. There's something beautiful about this game, which is in the playbook. They give these quick start rules, which is really a few pages of the broad flow of the game, which I think is what I'm going to try to present more than the detailed rules. We'll flip and maybe look at the detailed rules a little bit, just to get a better idea of them. But this is a brilliant idea. And, I kind of scoff at the equivalent situation, which is, say, Tim Jim's Let's Play. But the difference is the Let's Play rules in Tim Jim are usually about the same size as the main rules. Here we're talking about 6-7 pages summarizing 40-page rule book on the main game. It's a lot of little stuff that it's not going to cover, though, but it gets the main effects. Let's take a look at what we have. First of all, lots of charts. Battle odds shift table is going to determine how many battle shifts you get. Percentage loss, this is going to be kind of like a firepower system where it's not because the attacker, you actually take losses based on your own forces. You take a percentage of losses on your own forces, which is weird, but it looks pretty clearly that. You got this big set of charts here, and there's only two of each set of charts, but it's a 4-player game, so people can kind of share. I'm giving a lot of the different information, and I suspect I'm going to be using this a lot. It's a little extra size screen running these extras, and that's going to give a lot of the rules in a summary form that'll be very helpful, I hope. You also have the map itself, obviously point to point. Some of these tracks over here, a little disturbing. This one especially, this general track, seems to have a lot of overlap once you start looking at what it's going to run. And not a lot of room. So there's a lot of counters on here that I'm not sure all need to be in existence. Yeah, look at that stack. That's on the one space. Hopefully that'll change. It's going to be a 4-player game in basis, although there are rules for and scenarios for less. And what I'm going to be doing is the grand scenario, but then there's a further modification to that, the ultra-historical version. This game is not an ultra-historical game, I don't think. But the ultra-historical version, which actually what it does is normally the East would include both Ptolemaic Egypt and the Seleucids. In this, it says, okay, the Ptolemaics become sort of this minor power, and we strip them away and we leave the Seleucids on their own, which is going to make it very tough for the Seleucids to win. But for me, there's kind of the, there were internal struggles between the Ptolemaics and the Seleucids in this time. It doesn't really make sense to say they're one power just because that fits your victory conditions. It is not a game that allows for a lot of diplomacy, from what I can tell, which is kind of one of the reasons. So it would be no big deal if there's an extreme imbalance, if there's a lot of diplomatic ability. But there is some diplomatic leanings, which is to say, I don't think it would be unreasonable for Greece and the Seleucids to come to some sort of agreement as to, yeah, okay, you can have Asia Minor, I'm going to take, or we can split Asia Minor this way or whatever. Turns are 25 years each, which is a humongous level of abstraction. This game takes off at the point that essentially, there's a little bit of overlap, but essentially the point that Sword of Rome ends, where Rome already has most of Italy, although you still have the Greek colony here. You get Carthage over here in Sicily. We're at right about the beginning where the Punic Wars are going to start. But we still have Pyrrhus sitting over here, ready to move forward. All right. I could just keep babbling on and on about the situation, because this is really an exciting game to me in terms of the theory of it. The situation that it's set in. It just really grabbed me as this. My first thought was this is going to be a heavier sort. Here I go again. This is going to be a little heavier sort of Rome. It's not. It's probably not far in terms of level of abstraction. It's just it's got more rules, less card, although there is a deck. But it's not a CDG. And it's not a lot more rules. More charts, less cards. But what it does do is it shifts the scope of the game. Sword of Rome handles, I think, about a 50, 60 year period in total. This one handles, with 25 year turns, 250 years in one big scope. This is the growth of Rome era, but that's not going to be assured. You've got 4 major powers contending, each with their own little aspects. All right. So the basis here of the quick start rules, well, let's go a little bit into what the victory conditions are. They're a collection of victory points. Hey, it must be a euro. You collect victory points, though, through a number of different means. You're going to collect them through that's a good question. How do you get victory points? You collect them through these civ points and geographic objective points. Okay? So each turn, whoever kind of owns the most of the world, whoever has the biggest empire, gets a bigger share of the points available for that. And that ranges between the 4 players, I think, between 7 and 0. The person who's coming in the last in terms of size gets 0. The biggest guy gets like 7. Civ points work similarly, which is the most cities and towns that you have out of the 4 players. And they're the largest, most civilized player gets only 5 points, down to 0. You're going to collect those points throughout the game. You're also going to have these objective chits, and I haven't dealt these out yet, but each player gets like 3 of these, which, based on the power, determine some secret plan that they have. And once they have it, they can reveal it, and they get big piles of points. We're talking, I think, up to 8 points per turn for holding that objective. Now, these are tough objectives. For example, Rome's big one, it's either 8 or 16. 16 would be ridiculous, I think, but wants to own Egypt. Okay? Now, historically, they took Egypt, but not until very late in this, not until after this game. These are really kind of stretch goals. It might be a bonus to have lower valued ones, because you can get them and score the points for them maybe more than one time. It would be really tough to take Egypt as Italy, I think. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. We've also got just a little bit more on the pieces. We've got the starting locations. We've got Carthage kind of running through here, the islands, a little bit in Spain. We've got Greece with colonies all the way in the west as well as in the east, but mainly centered here. These little colonial areas aren't going to really do much unless they can focus there. They also have a strong presence in southern Italy. The Romans themselves are pretty much homogenous over here, and it's a nice kind of strong position to be in. However, they're one of the poorer powers at the beginning of the game, and the Seleucids similarly have a very centralized location. Actually, they're off map at the beginning of the game. These are Seleucid controlled areas, but they're off map at the beginning of the game, and they're going to have some struggles not only with the threat of the Greeks, but also with the problem with the Ptolemaics. Right. Now, what else is on here? You have these tribes, which are barbarian tribes. You can kind of leave them alone. Maybe cards which change that, but they're going to interfere with your control of areas. Now, one thing to note is, for example, in Italy, the tribes have all been cleaned up already. In sort of Rome, you'd have some tribes running through here, and you'd have Celts back here. Well, that's all been cleared up already, and Rome is pretty much, up in the hands of the players. You're also going to see barbarian invasions coming in from various locations off the board, including Britain, etc. That comes off the cards. It comes off these invasions. You have the possibility of rebellions, which will also use barbarian troops. These independent units. Independent cities to cover that. And there's the ability to purchase mercenary units for your own forces. I seem to remember I got an unpunched copy of this, in which case there are some missing pieces from the original countermix. Otherwise, maybe I'm just missing some. So I'm using like a couple of Roman Navy, or a Roman Navy to replace a Rhodes Navy there. The Egyptians don't seem to have their own navies, but they have them in the setup. That shouldn't be too big a deal, but I may have to make some of my own pieces to handle that kind of stuff as well. We haven't gotten to the rules yet. I know. There's two games in here. There's an advanced game, which of course is what I'm going to be playing, and then there's a standard game. Now, there's not a lot of difference. The biggest difference seems to be, do you use this deck of event cards, or do you use a more limited event table and these little chits that get thrown in to the activation cup mix to determine whether or not an event happens. With the event cards, every time a player gets an action, they're going to get to draw a card. With the event chits, certain activations are going to generate an event. Okay, this is a Berg game. He got into chit pull activation. This is one of the games that he's decided to use this on. In fact, the Ancient World series he uses it in too, which is something I hope to get to soon as well. The Rise of the Roman Republic, and of course Carthage, a little bit further away. Rise of the Roman Republic is the one I most want to get to, though, even if it's got less voting than Carthage. Okay, I've seen enough Carthage games. All right, what about a game turn? Well, you're going to collect income, and that's actually registered on here with these income chits, tens and ones value. This chart is terrible. It runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Completely, my brain cannot handle that, and I may just need to make my own charts for this, my own record track for this, just because that thing is so painful for me. I'll pull out the Der Weltkrieg one, perhaps. That's got a nice big one. Okay, now, your income is going to be made up of territories that you own, and for the most part, let me think, provinces that you own. There's a distinction here between provinces and territories. A territory is a whole colored region, with the exception that in this special scenario, Egypt and the East have been split. That all appears to be the East. They each have their own income in this scenario. They're considered separate areas so that the Seleucids don't get boned out of a territory. Okay. So territories are going to be marked with this. You can just say, hey, I own the whole territory. And that generates an additional income bonus, I think just 1 point, for the player who owns the entire territory. On top of that, there are certain locations that own us that produce an extra bonus. There are some provinces that are especially rich and will produce extra money, and that's supposedly noted on the back map. There are some that don't produce money, again noted on the map. Let me see if there's anything else that I'm thinking of. Cities and towns. So, I got to think about this. Towns, these are all represented with little counters, cities and towns, because they're destructible. That's a nice solution compared to, say, what Imperium Romanum 2 does, where they're all on the map with these little weird symbols on them to indicate what scenarios out of the 30, 40 scenarios that IR2 has. Here you don't need it as much, but the gameplay is of such a scale that cities and towns were being destroyed during this period or built. And it's up to the players to do so. It's not just some automatic function of time. Okay, so I believe it's $1 for a town and $3 for a city. I'd have to look at the scenarios to see. Yeah, it looks like $3 each for the cities. Okay. And, just the territory that you own gets you this cash. Then you have to pay for maintenance for your fleets. Fleets always have to pay maintenance, and there's these little counters to help represent this. I don't remember these being terribly well explained, but you indicate how many of your galleys you're going to maintain, and if you don't maintain them, they go away. It's also possible that armies will cost you money. If you've gone over your manpower limits for your country, you have to pay a continuing fee to keep your armies in the field. I think that's indicating some sort of mercenaries, but standing mercenary armies, as opposed to these guys which disappear. Or perhaps just an over-militarized society. Let's see. Then we hit this removal phase, where you're going to be basically doing some bookkeeping type activity here. Mercenaries come off the map. Leaders are all going to come off the map. 25-year turns, hey, you got 2 leaders, each country gets 2 leaders each turn. They're probably too old by the time the next turn comes around, so you draw some more on there. Soldiers of Fortune disappear, barbarians disappear, all kinds of stuff comes off the map at that point. Then you pick new leaders. You'll be getting 2 new leaders each turn per country. The first leader goes into your capital, and then the second one you can place any territory you like that you have. If you don't have a capital anymore, you can't put them there. Capitals are distinguished by this kind of symbol there. They are important to the nation's stability. And yes, you see there's a stability track there. You will be penalized if you can't hold on to your capital during that. And the capital is considered so prestigious to your country that you cannot just declare you've moved your capital in this game. Alright, manpower. Manpower phase, you're going to be able to purchase troops with your cash. Now, cash is a weird sort of thing because you want to have some left over for your turn itself. Each time, you're going to have probably 4 activations recorded by these chits here in a cup, of course. You're going to have 4 activations. Each time you get one, you got to pay a talent to use it. And you must do this if you have a talent. The rules are a little fuzzy about this in places, as in you must, at times they seem to imply you must save the money for your 4 activations. I think that's a little silly, but because elsewhere they give conditions for what happens if you don't, which don't seem terribly harsh, like you don't lose a finger or anything. Anyway, you have to pay for each of your activations. There are other things, maybe some of the cards, the events where you want to have money left over, but you're able to buy your units And that's done. Alright, time to start digging into the charts. That's done off the unit chart here. And you have the indication of how much it costs to build, how much it costs to improve. Units are weird in this game, the counters. So most of the counters are just strength point counters, like a light infantry with a 1 is 1 light infantry, and on the back, hey, there's 2 light infantry. You can tell there's 2 because of the number up on the top there, in addition to the strength. Heavier things, heavy infantry and legions, come in strength 3 or 4 for just 1. If you flip it over, that's a damaged side. But this is 2 heavy infantry, it's worth 6. If I flip it over, it should be damaged? No, because that's actually not allowed. What I got is a bigger change there. That's 5 heavy infantry, and then we multiplied strength by 3. The reason for that is you're actually not allowed to have in a single stack, basically. Well, as a result of combat. You're not allowed to have more than 1 damaged unit. So there's no need to say, that's 3 damaged heavy infantry or anything like that. So they used up the extra counter sheet. But it does take a little getting used to, I would guess, there. Most of the other things, I think, are simply backsided from multiple. You also have these garrison units which have 0 strength. Wow, that doesn't sound very potent. And they have other units on the back printed side, light infantry or whatever, in case you need them. I assume you're limited by counter mix, which is troublesome because not all the counters are here in my set apparently, or maybe they just aren't here. You also have some overlap, like talents are tracked on here. Now I'm going to take them off here, but we also have little coins. I'm going to use the coins, I think, because honestly, trying to keep track of that on that mess of a chart is just beyond my ability. Like I said, I'm probably going to move that from there. Anyway, you pay your bucks, you build things. Let's see, where? I don't know. Pretty much home area, I would guess. Yeah, well, we'll have to get to the specifics on that. Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. Then we go to the manpower, right, we did the manpower phase. Then we go to the activation phase. And here, this is a little twisted because at the beginning of the game, there's going to be a play order. Each person sets 1 activation marker out. And I think that's based on victory points. I don't remember what order. Unfortunately, they don't give everything here. They couldn't. And then when we go here, .42. Okay. The order of play is going to be the victory point level. The player with the fewest goes first, the second fewest next, etc. That's set up across here. And then, after that, you're going to draw from a cup these activation markers to see who goes next. So the first action for each player is preset. Now, somewhere I saw a rule that you can't get 2 in a row unless you're the last player. Basically, you throw it back. So if you're the highest victory point player, you're not going to get a double turn right away off that, which is kind of cool. Well, let's load this up and combine it with another video. Okay. So, in terms of who gets to go, we've handled the activation there. Then you have to pay a talent. And they say C3.43 if you're broke or don't want to pay. I don't think you cannot want to pay. Well, the numbers are all screwed up on this game. The rules have a real problem where the numbering system did not get sufficiently handled. You must pay. There's no choice here. But if you cannot pay, you don't get an activation. You just lose it. Alright. Then, now, here you see the events in the card segment. Basically, if an event chit was played, you would roll on an event table in the basic game or standard game. In this card segment, what happens is you draw a card. Now, some of the cards are going to say hold in hand, which of course means you have some limited ability to hold them. Now, you're never allowed to hold more than 3 at once. The rules are a little contradictory on this, whether or not you throw out the card immediately or get to play it immediately. It seems to imply that you must throw it out if you ever end up with more than 3 cards. So it's kind of like, I think Empires in the Middle Ages has that, where you have to keep 2. Anyway, that's what I'm going to try to play for, but we'll see. It's not that they're contradictory, but there's a contradictory implication there. If you read them strictly, it does look like you're only allowed to hold 3 cards, and if you draw an additional one, you must discard one. That's the way I would put it. Contradictory is kind of the wrong word, but there is an implication of a contradiction in there, the way it's worded. Like, because one does not expect that a rule book is going to be perfect. So if you read it strictly, you would do what I'm doing. But you might have some questions if that's what was intended. There are also non-holding ones, which you play immediately. I think they say play immediately on them. And they take an immediate effect as an event. The event chits, well, we're not going to worry too much about them. So with the held cards, like I said, you can hold up to 3 of them. But at the end of your turn, you can only hold, or at the end of the game turn, you can only hold 1. So through a series of activations, you can have a bunch of cards in your hand, but if you don't play them all by the end of the game turn, you must discard most of them at that point. Then you go to the operation segment, and you're going to have 3 different choices of operations here in the standard game. In the advanced game, you only have the 2. The 2 are expansion, which is basically being able to do movement. And that'll be split into a major move and 2 minor moves. And we'll explain that a little bit. They don't sound as... They're not purely military, though. Military actions are to move and attack on the board, but you can also use minor moves on this to build towns and cities up into place. They require troops, though, to be established, so that's a little weird there. But anyway, you can expend some of your effort on civilizing. These are 25-year terms. On the alternative side, you can do recruitment, which allows you to take your cash and build new units immediately. Hey, where'd you get that cash from? Yeah, let's talk about that later. The final thing is in the standard game, you can call a meeting where you basically waste your activation on a negotiations opportunity. You get to talk to somebody, try to cut a deal with them. You can't do this otherwise. In here, there are some negotiation, essentially, cards that allow you to take somebody aside just by playing a card. So it doesn't cost you an activity. Now, with 25-year turns, you might say, hey, wait a minute. Shouldn't there be enough time to do diplomacy whenever you like? And there is kind of that argument in the game, but the flip side that the base design follows, which I'm going to do because it actually makes life a little easier on me not to have a lot of negotiation going on to worry about. The flip side is that these countries, these powers, weren't necessarily capable of negotiating all the time. There would be, ambassadors going back and forth and such not, but the idea of actually cutting a reasonable, significant deal between Rome and Carthage, or between the Greek states, and there are more than one included in the Greece, would be fairly low. There was distrust, there was, other factors to get in the way here. So by putting this limitation on the players, it's kind of a cool factor in my idea, or in my mind. Okay, and then you draw a new marker and let the next person go. At the end of the turn, you apply attrition. If your forces can't trace a supply line, they will suffer. It's not absolute, but it's a significant attrition. And also any fleets that aren't in port suffer attrition, which I think means they die. Then you add up victory points. You reflect changes in stability, which sometimes can happen in the middle of the game. Basically, territories at the end of the turn, there are things like, hey, he's in my capital, or I don't have home provinces, or I own additional provinces that increase or decrease your stability. Check scenario rules for an automatic victory. I think that's 150 victory points. If you can get to that, you win automatically in this one. I'm not sure. Which seems a little weird because it means that two people doing very well could be in a race to win the game at that point, as opposed to being forced into sort of this climactic struggle at the end. Yeah, whatever. And then you reshuffle the event deck, and you determine who goes up next. Okay, moving by land. You remember, your military, your expansion opportunity gives you 3 actions, 1 major, 2 minor. Your major activation says you can move a stack of units. The minor move, if you use that for units, means you can move 1 unit. For a major, for moving a stack or an individual unit, and this game uses only d6s. I need more than this, but you roll a d6 and you add the leader's one of the numbers. Let's see. You add the leader's. I can probably figure out the name is something like strategic value, but shit. Okay. There we go. Campaign value, which is the second number, which kind of surprises me. So, for example, this guy has a rating of 5. He would roll a die and add 5 to it. That's how many movement points he would get. All right. What kind of movement points do things cost? Well, most things cost 1, sort of. Somewhere or another, there's probably a chart for this. Let's go look for that. There are a lot of charts. Here we go. Movement point expenditure. So the rules are definitely lacking here, but basically entering a space costs a movement point. As does entering a transit point, which is these little dots. Those are like spaces, except you can't stay in them. Therefore, there can be no combat in them. Additional costs, for example, a mountain fortress, which I believe is anything with mountains on it. Basically, all of these little circles are, as opposed to dots, are some sort of civilized habitation, even if they don't qualify as even a town in the game. There is enough civilization there that that mountain fortress seems like a reasonable term for it to them. Create garrisons. I'm trying to remember. I think you basically convert units into garrisons. Like you break down a unit into garrison units by doing that. Garrisons are useful because they can control territory that you don't without expending real troops. Otherwise, they're pretty useless. Picking up friendly units as you move costs you. Entering an enemy-occupied space costs an additional point. Okay, well, an additional point on what? I'm entering an unoccupied space. What? Okay, and that's where I say that that's definitely contradictory. Say when you do naval movement, you spend a point to get on the boat. You sail as far as you like. That can't be right. Not quite, but okay. In terms of movement points for the ground unit, you sail as far as you like, and then I believe you spend a point to get off the boat. Indeed. Now, here's the thing. You can move as many of your movement points as you like, but you may do something that makes you stop. And let us look to see if there's a stopping list. I believe there was. Garrison breakdown. This is what you get out of garrison units if you spend the movement point. So if you take a light infantry unit that has a strength point of 1, you can create 2 strength point 0 garrison units out of it. You can break your entire army down into garrison units or an entire stack down into garrison units as it's moving. It just costs 1 movement point to do the whole breakdown. just to clarify that if that's an issue. Here we go is stopping. So for example, a fleet has to stop when it enters an enemy-controlled port, when it enters an unoccupied non-friendly port. So basically, when it enters a naval transit point or deep sea transit point, whenever you enter one of these dots, which can kill you if you stay stuck at them, you stop. And then you have to roll on this continuity table to see whether or not you get to keep moving. That could be a problem. In general, what it means is you want to sail along the coastline. But that can be a problem because coastlines are easier to interdict. Now I remember there's stopping happening after battle, potentially, as well. And let's see if that's covered in here. Okay, touch this. You can move a galley squadron as your stack. It doesn't expend any movement points unless it picks up some infantry. If it picks up some infantry, it has now turned into a naval transport move. I don't think the infantry can go beyond the port that you land them in. They're not going to have a lot of movement points probably anyway. But then you do have to check the movement points and make sure that you have them so that when you stop, pick things up, drop things off, etc., you're not going over the limit. Leaders on their own move a little faster. Okay. I believe there's stoppage rules for ground units moving. But maybe I'm mistaken. Alright, well, if we hit it, we hit it. Otherwise, we'll see it in the playthroughs, right? I'm just trying to give an idea here, not the full boat of rules. For movement into an enemy area, you have to have movement points left to leave that area in case you're defeated, or in case essentially you can't beat the enemy away from the area. The enemy's got an ability to withdraw if he wishes, and he just rolls a die, and that's how many movement points he can wander away. There's a penalty to withdrawal, however. If you do it in your home area, it's going to affect your stability. You're giving up territory that your country considers so important that it's kind of disturbed by the fact that you're, being Fabius. Whenever a unit moves adjacent to one of yours, you get an interception chance, and you roll a couple of dice. Number of modifiers here, which I think includes the tactical rating. Not the strategic that we used here, but the tactical, which is also going to be used for combat modifiers. And you basically have to break a 12. No, you must roll a 12 or higher on 2 dice to be able to intercept. But what's kind of neat about interception in this is you can intercept just about anything. You can intercept units retreating, you can intercept units withdrawing, you can intercept units doing any kind of movement. The only exception to that is, so for example, if I attack a space, I can't intercept the withdrawing or retreating enemy with the force that attacked, but another force could, which can cause for some kind of interesting little dynamics where it's very difficult to get out of a battle. You might get pinned up against terrain you can't get out of easily or something. Okay. As to fleet movement, you don't need galleys to do fleet movement. You can send your troops sailing into the fleet, by water, no matter what. The only danger there is if you get caught by enemy warships, you're sunk. So you need to have some sort of escort with you to protect you if there's any enemy ships in the area. Actually fighting the battles. Ugh. Damned if I remember this. It's a reductum ad absurdum type situation where you compare the strength point modifiers and the odds, and that gives you a modifier. Odds on this are rounded, which means you don't have to achieve 2-to-1 odds to get the 2-to-1 odds bonus. What you have to achieve is kind of hard to tell because there's a 1.5-to-1 odds in here. So I'm guessing as long as you achieve 1.75-to-1, you get the 2-to-1 odds, and that goes up to 2.5-to-1, just below that. Once you hit 2.5-to-1, then you're getting 3-to-1 odds. And 2-to-1 odds gives you a +2 to the die roll. 3-to-1 odds +3, etc. 1.5-to-1 gives you a +1 to the die roll. Okay, and that's going to be your battle odds bonus. This is going to be a roll-off between the two players. What's going to happen is each player rolls one die, they add all their modifiers, and that is the percentage of your opponent's troops that are lost. It's really that simple. There's a lot of tables, etc., to handle covering that, but it really is the easiest way to describe it. You got a number of things: cavalry, superiority, and supremacy. If you have more cav than your opponent, you get a bonus. If you have, what is it? I think it's twice as much for cav supremacy. You get a +3 bonus. There's other effects to this, like withdrawal, interceptions, and stuff like that, maybe. I'm not sure. The difference between tactical ratings gives a bonus. These bonuses don't have to be positive. You can throw them as a negative on your opponent's die roll. Basically, both players roll the dice. The person who has the most bonuses gets to allocate them in whichever direction they like. The dice can go from anywhere from a 0 to a 10. You can cause 0% losses, or you can cause 100% losses. No more or less than those. No less or more. The defender gets a bonus shift of 1 if he retreats and is losing. That can only be used to subtract from his losses. The percentage. Okay. Let's skip forward here and see about towns. Well, okay. So whoever takes the lowest percentage loss is the winner of the battle, but that doesn't mean that he has to retreat, that the loser has to retreat. In fact, the defender is the only one who can retreat, and he only does so if he lost the battle. It's an option that reduces his losses by 10%. He retreats 1 or 2 spaces. However, the attacker can force a retreat if he has a movement point left, and that includes forcing that 10% bonus in losses or reduction of losses on your opponent as well. And if your opponent does retreat, you're allowed to continue moving, and you can attack him again in during that same activation. No continuation, no stopping on this. If you attack and you do not cause the defender to retreat for whatever reason, you have to spend that spare movement point you kept. You have to keep a spare movement point or spare movement points. Nope, I lied. You return to the space from which you entered the battle space, and then if you have more movement points, you can come back and fight some more. Which means you could actually attack, win a battle, fall back, attack again, and win the battle again. And cause more damage to your opponent. All depends on how many movement points you have and what you want to do with them. But remember, the defender can just withdraw, and then you can just keep pursuing him. Naval battles are going to fight pretty much the same way. No. Naval battles are going to fight on a differential system, which I think the original game probably used. They used this percentage system because they were getting really unrealistic battles where a larger force always won. But that's going to be the case with naval battles, which may or may not be all that historically accurate either. You roll a die, you add your battle points for the force to the die roll, and the loser will lose battle points equal to the difference. Each galley is worth 2 battle points. And then retreats. The winner rolls another die with a chance of losing 1 galley. Okay. How do you control territories? Okay, your home territory is yours as long as nobody else is there. As long as there's nothing there, you own it. Outside of that, though, you have to occupy a territory with a land unit to own it. You control the province by actually occupying half the spaces, or by controlling, or by being the only power with any force in that. What is the word? Province or territory here? Province, the smaller thing. If you're the only person with anything there, you control it. So, for example, here, we got a garrison here. And we've got this. Well, I'm not sure that neither player owns it. You control it unless... Oh, no. He owns more than half the spaces, so he actually controls Syria. But if this were somewhere else, let's see. Well... So, for example, down here, this is one of the more interesting. We have Carthage owns 2 out of the 3 spaces in Baetica. That's more than half, so he has it. But if he didn't have a piece here, he would not own it, right? Because he no longer controls at least half the spaces. Yet, if both he and the tribe were gone, he would own this with just 1 piece. I hope that makes sense. Alright. And that's the basic. Now, building cities. If you have a garrison in a space, like this guy does, you can convert that into a town of your control by spending 2 talents, and you eliminate the garrison, and you get a town. And that actually has its own residual defense as well, of 1 strength point. If you have a town and a heavy infantry unit, you can build a city by paying 3 talents and eliminating both of them. And then the town becomes a city under your control with 3 strength points. These also produce money and civ points, so they're of some value. But the fact that they cost you troops and more money means that they significantly can affect your ability to fight. Towns add strength if you're fighting in them, in your favor. If you use a battle with a town, if I recall correctly, there's a limit to the level of military bonus that can happen from it. Essentially, I think it's 1. Nobody can have more than 1 battle die roll shift. And you can bid on siege expertise by just bidding talents, and whoever bids the most gets a point for that. I will look that up when I start doing sieges. Alright, we need to split another one off because I want to get into the special units. Well, alright, I'll just very, very briefly get into them. Special units, we already have talked about cavalry. They give you certain bonuses. Elephants can negate cav bonuses. But that's done on a table. You kind of roll for each elephant and see if it has an effect. It can cause problems for the army that uses them as well. Some of these others, militia, when you lose a battle, you can form militia at a cost of stability. Mercenaries, you're allowed to buy using cards. Soldier of Fortune comes from this card, which starts out for Pyrrhus, who's over here, and that gives you control of him for a turn. Barbarian infantry comes in from cards, and neutral powers come in from cards and can play. I'll load this one as well. Alright, let's try that again. Apparently I didn't delete my video. So, going to go through I think we've covered most of the core rules. I'm going to go through some of the more specifics and see what we can find here. In particular here, there's an option to allow you free diplomacy over here. Raising land units. You can only build it kind of what you control. Home territory a little bit less limited, but basically you can build troops outside of your home territory. Maintenance costs. Fleet maintenance is going to be 1 talent per galley, and this is secretly done with these little counters to indicate how many you're going to keep. But army maintenance, it's 1 talent per heavy infantry or a legion that's above your manpower maximum, which is over on this table. And yes, I spent some time looking for that table on the prior video and then found out I was out of time. Carthage has a limit where it cannot go over its manpower maximum no matter what. A little weird there to me because Carthage really almost didn't have its own army. It had a largely mercenary force, which seems like it would have been the more flexible overall, but they actually had a small army compared to compared to Rome at least. So I think that was kind of the intention there, was to try to cover it that way instead. Cost for building towns. Oh, when you take a town, you're allowed to sack and plunder it. You have to kind of make a roll to see if you do so, and you get some cash. However, you get less cash if you have any mercenaries with you. And there's a chance that that can stop your movement. Actually, more than stop it, because you don't get a continuation roll. It finishes your movement for the AM. Stopping seems to be just a naval thing. Leaders have kind of gone into. There's a possibility of elite leaders. If you draw a leader who's elite, he's going to be particularly good. I think that has some bonuses beyond this. But one of the factors here, oh yes, they can become conquerors by event. Makes them into Alexander the Great or something. One of the problems with an elite leader, or whatever, you don't put him back in the cup when you get him for the next turn. But he returns to the cup later, so you just can't get him 2 turns in a row. And you might have more than one elite leader. Alpine passes. That these? I thought those are the mountain fortresses. Alpine passes are land spaces that are located straddling the mountain borders between several provinces, one of which is always Italy. Okay, well these look the same as these, so no, I don't think so. You have to roll a special Alps attrition. Alright, unfortunately there is not a key. And there doesn't seem to be one anywhere in the game for the map. So these are mountain fortresses. They're named areas. I'm assuming the Alpine passes are simply these 3 spaces. That's all I can guess. They look similar enough to this, but anyway, they have a special procedure. They're kind of transit points with... They take an attrition roll when they go across. When you're isolated, If you're non-garrison units, you have to trace a line of communication back to your home territory. If you can't do that, you're going to take a die roll and a percentage losses based on that. Rerolls. If you have 2-to-1 odds, this is an option that I'm probably not going to play with. They made an option to try to make the combat a little less random than it is, which is to say, if you had 2-to-1 odds, they allow you to like re-roll one of the dice. It's also a simplified rounding option, which the game is not designed for, but it's kind of like, well, some people are doing this anyway, so we figure if you're too stupid. And it's true, it is a pain in the butt to do standard rounding, especially once you start putting 1.5 in there. It's something I always disliked about the OCS. I wish games took that in mind and didn't design themselves around the problem. But okay. I'm just looking through to make sure that we've got most of the stuff covered. It actually mainly did handle it. Independence. We have some of these on the board. Now they have their own pieces to begin the game. There's also a card that'll bring Pontus into play, which doesn't seem to have its own pieces. There are revolts, pirates. They're going to cause problems in here. Rebellions, barbarian invasions. All of these things come somewhat specified, which is to say a barbarian invasion by the Gauls might be different from one, it is different than one from the Germans. So, you know, there's no general rule for them. They're just going to be troops. Yeah, even how often they're activated is not specified. For example, the Germans can be activated by anyone, whereas the Gallic barbarians activate once and then stop. Okay, stability effects, a whole list of different things here. I don't really want to go through the whole list. Losing battles in your home area, retreating, creating militia, stuff like that's bad. Letting barbarians or enemies into your home area, bad stuff. Capturing new areas, though, is bonus. It's all fairly simple things. You are limited here, though. If you have more heavy infantry or legions than you do civilization points, you take a stability penalty. Now they do say, to use an option, and I think it's a good idea, that you can disband your army as part of your activations in order to avoid paying that. But, you know, that's something you do in the middle of your turn. Victory is going to be determined by geographic objectives, which are basically provinces. Civilization points, which are the cities you have under your control. And these opportunity objective points, I've gone over that. You just generate points based on those. There's nothing else, actually. And the objective opportunities are on a per power basis. Each player has their own things that would be hard for them that they're rated on. There's explanations of some of the event cards. And that's about it. It's going to be a learning experience to try playing it. I'm going to probably have to figure out some way around, you know, how to cope with that chart there. But other than that, we'll get started and probably make a few mistakes. We'll see how it all turns out, though. All right, up it goes.